Hi, everyone. I am so excited because I am speaking with author Matthew Quirk, and we are talking about his brand new book, just came out January 15th, and it's called The Night Agent. I love this book, Matthew. I read it so
Thank
fast.
you.
I can't even tell you how fast I read it.
Great.
I love your writing style. And, it's interesting because this genre lately hasn't been my thing. Like I kind of go in and out with the political thriller kind of a book. But this, I was like, your book makes me now want. I'm like, oh yeah, I have to do this again. I have to go back into my political thrillers because I was so hooked on them so much back in the day, And
yeah,
it's just amazing.
And it's a good time for them, Politics, It seems to go through its crazy phases and its relatively sane phases, and it was fun for me to see this book sort of catch up with the headlines and then get ahead of the headlines a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, and I worked in D.C. for like 3 or 4 years back in the 90s.
Oh.
So I loved kind of being back in that world again. I worked right, a 5-minute walk from the White House. It was really.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that was back in the day before you had all the security around the White House, so we could literally walk down the street and past the White House. And now that seems so absurd because you can't even get close. But I was like kind of reliving that whole atmosphere. You did such a great job, like putting me right there in the middle of the city. And I love the main character. I loved him so much. Anyway, you start off in the prologue. What I loved. I'm just going to tell you what I loved about your book, so you can just sit back and relax.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you.
I love that you introduced him in the prologue, like very specifically. Like I felt like I already knew him, and I think that is so different than other books in this genre because sometimes I'll get halfway through the book and feel like I don't even know the main character, which will then make me not that interested, but I felt like I knew him right away, Yeah,
it's funny. It's drawn from knowing a lot of national security people. I worked at the Atlantic in D.C. as a reporter for a long time, and we were right down the street from the White House. We were in Foggy Bottom. The office was in the Watergate.
Yep, I know exactly where that is.
Such a great first job to be in the Watergate. You're like, yeah, just throw me in the deep end of the Washington skullduggery. And, then the national security people tend to be straight arrows. So that was kind of the starting point to stay authentic to the people who live in that world. He's an FBI agent and, surveillance expert and an analyst. And, then to complicate the character of maybe he's so by the book because he's looking for redemption for himself and his family, or he's a little afraid of what he might find if he strays outside the line. So that made for a fun character.
Oh, yeah, he was so much fun. And I love how you ended the prologue. You say, this ended only one way, looking down at the barrel of a gun. And I was one of those readers who, when I went on your website, so everybody, you can go on his website and read the prologue. And I did that, and right then I was like, I'm in. Now I got to know what happened. Like, that was like, because I thought the prologue was so good. I was like, yes, I want to read.
You have to hook people, you know?
Yes.
People don't have a lot of attention these days, so you got to get in there.
Yes, and you know what? I tell authors this all the time. Some of them are kind of shocked by this, but they're not in your genre for the most part. But I always tell them my favorite sentence is the last sentence of the first chapter. And they're always like, oh, that's it. I'm like, because I got to get to chapter 2. You've got to get me to chapter 2, put the prologue into chapter 1. You got to get me there as a reader. And then you got me right because I'm like, yep, I'm buying it. I'm getting it. So. And
you have to build in all your characters and start laying in all your surprises. And, some of the twists don't pay off till 50 pages before the end, but you also need to keep things percolating from page 1. So the thriller makes for a very interesting, challenging writing exercise.
Yeah. And, I was sick over the weekend, but the best part of my weekend was reading your book. Okay?
Oh.
Like I couldn't do
Thank
much
you.
else. So I read your book right straight through, and it was fun. You know, it was like it gave me something to do, and I was like so into it that I didn't want to get up anyway. And so for anybody who just wants to sit down and read a book in a day, like this is the perfect book to do that.
And people talk about binge watching as if that's a relatively new thing. Us
right.
readers are like, we've been binge reading since before you even had TV. We know what goes on.
That's so true. That's so funny because I was just talking to one of my children about Netflix, and they were like, so what are you watching? I'm like, I don't watch TV because I read all the time. Like, it's very little, I have to tell you, because us as readers, and especially, doing the things that I do, like, I don't have time for TV. I haven't read it, but I'd rather read. So, that's just so funny.
It's great when you have a nice reading groove.
Yeah.
When you have a bunch of great books lined up, you have an author or a genre that you're into, and you just tuck yourself away.
So tell us, like, you say you came up with Peter because he was kind of straightforward kind of guy. So did you know, like, where you were going to take him right away?
Yeah, from the beginning. Finding the character always takes a bit of time, so it came from that authentic national security characters tend to be straight arrows. And then I was fortunate to get to know some people who do intelligence work. And when I was thinking about some of the, larger plot arcs of this book, which involves kind of a Russian penetration of the U.S. government, which turned out to be very timely, I talked to somebody who worked in the FBI and CIA when the Robert Hansen case was going on. And Robert Hansen was this Russian mole who was the most unassuming guy. You would never suspect him. He was at church every Sunday. And he spied for Russia for 20 years and got a bunch of people killed. So the idea of, your public face as a straight arrow and this private face as a mole really appealed to me. And talking to people who worked in that world flesh that out. So with Peter, the idea came of, what if his father was suspected of being involved in something like that, but never proven? He passes away before the truth can come out. And then you have Peter, who is living in that shadow. And so it has something to prove and works his way into the FBI, even though they really don't want anything to do with his family anymore. And even works his way into the White House Situation Room. And you take a character like that who's a straight arrow, who really loves doing everything by the book and, finds the rules a way to check himself. And, he's worried he might be like his father in some way. It's a lot of murky stuff of fear. And then you take a character like that and you sort of force them across all these lines that they've been so careful to not to cross their whole life. And it just makes for a really neat character study. And, it's fun in the prologue. You do a bit of the flash forward business and you show those two faces of the character. And then people can kind of strap in for the ride of how does this guy go from by the book to how we see him totally having to go outside the lines.
Yeah, and I think we always want to envision that things like that are happening, or what if they're happening in the White House. Like, it's always like that mystery of what really happens there. Like, like I think that proves us, like, what really happens in there? Like, what's really going on?
The night agent piece of this, the idea that you have somebody who is a relatively young guy, he works a night watch at an op center, and he just waits for a crisis, and he might find himself, even as a young person, briefing the president or having to wake up the president, a situation like that. That's based on a real-life FBI friend of mine. And, sometimes you think, in thrillers, everything's a little crazy and over the top, and then in real life, everything's by the book and very tied up with a bow. But I would hear stories of things like this and, conflicts. And it's fascinating to get the real life version of things and then to bring that into the fictional world.
Yeah, I love. Well, I had someone I graduated with who was Secret Service to Bush W.
Mm-hmm.
We had a class reunion. He had a little too much to drink and started, telling stories. Nothing of national security, but he talked about how that when they would take him out to ride bikes, that he was really into riding bikes. Okay, especially when he was down in Texas.
Down in Crawford. Yeah.
Yeah. That they were never allowed to beat him. Like he had to always be ahead. So he was like,
and that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, in the book, another way, as an author, because the president is a character in the book, and you want to make him human. Presidents often appear in these thrillers, but I was really flattered that people said this felt very real, and one of the ways that Peter ends up having access to the president, he's a former basketball star in college. Not a star, just a very talented player.
Right.
And the president, who used to go on church missions, used to play basketball all the time. And so he picks him up for games in the way President Obama used to play with aides. And so you have this question where you see an open lane, do you take a shot? Do you win?
Right.
And the president doesn't like people to take it easy on him. So you have that challenge. And there was a real life incident where somebody accidentally elbowed Obama on the court. And the president needed 6 stitches. And I sort of got that moment in the book because, you're playing, it's a very physical game.
Right.
And then you look down and the president is on the ground and Secret Service is, going into their on the balls of their toes mode, and you're like, oh my God, did they shoot me now? Do I go to jail? So that was fun to get into the book.
Yeah, it's awesome to see them humanized in that manner. That's very cool. But I was trying to see what number book is this for you?
This is book 5.
Yeah, I thought so. I just wanted to, because sometimes on Amazon it looks because there are different versions, and you're like, wait, how many books is this? So this is book 5 in how many years of writing?
And I think the first one came out in 2012.
Wow.
It was called The 500. So, the first 2 books are one character, which is really fun. He it's a guy who moves to D.C. It's inspired by me feeling like a fish out of water in D.C. because I got access to all this fancy political stuff, and I was a relatively regular guy from New Jersey, and I got into Harvard and then worked at the Atlantic, and so took some of those fish out of water feelings, of seeing all this fancy genteel stuff. And then for the character, it's a guy who grows up in a family of kind of con men and small-time criminals, and he works his way up to Harvard Law, and he ends up landing at a very white shoe kind of lobbying firm type thing, thinking that he is more of a political consultancy, thinking that he's finally arrived in the legit genteel world, and he finds out they hired him because he comes from a world of con men and criminals, and he'll do just fine in D.C. So those 2 books are really fun, sort of in that way. Yeah, and then there's 2 with Mike Ford, that character, and then there's 2 with a character named John Hayes, who was inspired by, I live in San Diego now, some friends who do special operations work, and I saw them sort of go through the training, got to know their families, and felt like I could tackle that once I got to know that world a little better. And there's one called Cold Barrel Zero and one called Dead Man Switch, and those are kind of books in that kind of in a born identity kind of vein. And they're a lot of fun. And now this is a standalone, so you can jump right in with The Night Agent.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this one is so much fun. And I'm looking at the covers of all of them because I'm looking at Amazon as we're talking because I was going through them. And I was like, I love this cover so much. And I was like, because I love the colors. I love the White House in the background. And then the blue, I don't know. They did such a good job on the colors of this cover.
And the gloss, you have to get your hands on the hardcover jacket because I just sit and twist it in the light and look at it like a crazy person because it's really they did a beautiful job, and sometimes parts will look like they're in shadow, sometimes the White House will shine, sometimes the little lamp that's hanging in front of the White House main entrance will like jump out at you. So yeah, they did a beautiful job. I'm with William Morrow Books now, and they're just incredible. They do a great job. I'm very fortunate. Yeah.
I'm one of those crazy people because I get most of my books on Kindle, so I can, I get digital. But I'll go to Barnes and Noble not to buy books, but to hold the books that I've read, to see their cover, like just to get a glimpse of them and hold them and be like, I read this and look at how beautiful it is, and I'm just and I'll take pictures of them, and because I love because it doesn't do justice on digital. I want to see it.
Yeah,
like and see
and
the
they're
colors.
still making, the beautiful covers. And I remember, God, I kind of grew up on paperback thrillers, and I remember stuff with cutouts, and I'd be like, "Oh, this is so cool."
Oh yeah,
and it's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, like most people. I was looking at some kind of marketing thing, and a lot of people still find books in the bookstore, and just go on a whim and the cover and what the book is about. And I love that idea because that's kind of how I grew up. Just walking through the bookstore and just grabbing something and diving in.
Yeah, well, we always like to think that we don't judge a book by its cover, but a good cover.
Oh no, the cover is so important.
Right, the cover does draw you in. So, are you writing a book a year now?
That's the plan. Yeah, I handed in a draft of the next one, and kind of waiting for notes on that. And yeah, plugging away in this vein of real life Washington characters like the night agent, who I got to know, and relatively relatable people who are sort of in a position, a kind of gee whiz real life position like the night agent, to pull back the curtain on power a little bit. And I love that as a way into, DC chicanery and how politics works and all the intrigue.
Well, I can't wait because I will read it. I will be an early reader for you. I will read that book.
Okay, I look forward to that.
I love the fact that you got blurbs from Michael Connelly and Lee Child on it too.
Oh,
I was like,
I'm so blown away by that.
Isn't that crazy?
They're some of my writing heroes. Yeah, and I just sent a manuscript and a nice note to Michael Connelly, very early, because I know he has a crazy schedule, and crossed my fingers. And then the note came back, and I was running around to my wife, jumping for joy, because he said it was like one of the best thrillers he's read in years, and so I've been incredibly fortunate in that regard.
I just love when I see authors like that, like be so encouraging to newer authors, I should say, because you're not new, but I just love when they're so encouraging because you can only imagine their schedule too to take the time to read,
right.
And I'm sure they get handed, I wouldn't even want to guess how many books they get handed to read, but that's why when I see it, I'm like, okay, so there you go.
Well, the thriller and mystery and crime community is sort of famous for having this great pay it forward culture. Mm-hmm. And it's been something that you notice is kind of cultivated from some of those very top people. Like Lee Child is so helpful to people, and another author, a terrific author whose book comes out today, actually two authors who were incredibly kind to help me with advice have books coming out today. We're recording this a little bit before it comes out, but right. Greg Hurwitz and Joseph Finder have books, Out of the Dark and Judgment, respectively. And it's just sort of funny because they were so helpful to me and acted as if it was just what you do. And then I asked, one of them, like, if there's anything I can do to help you, or I don't know. I was just so grateful that they took the time, help me out with advice and that sort of thing. And he said, just pay it forward. And I thought, wow, what a great culture and community around mystery and crime and thrillers.
Yeah.
Prettiest we've seen.
And they have an amazing conference in New York City, like once a year. I think like in July.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's two. That's Thriller Fest, and
Thriller Fest. Yeah.
yeah, that was started I think by David Morrell and Gail Lynns. David Morrell wrote Rambo and a bunch of other great stuff, and Gail Lynns writes great spy thrillers. And you go there, and yeah, it's a really fun scene. It's at the Hyatt. And the other place is BoucherCon, which is a big mystery convention, which is even bigger and a little bit more accessible. Usually they try to keep it affordable so fans can come too. And yeah, I've had wonderful career breaks that just came from being there and having coffee with people and then just being like, oh, I'll help you out. You should talk to this guy.
Yeah. Well, you also did mention Brad Parks, and I interviewed Brad Parks a couple of times. He is amazing too. I mean, he's in the community.
He's really helpful
awesome,
too.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Brad Parks at Thriller Fest
will
often do some sort of like a cappella performance because he is an incredible singer. So is Daniel Palmer, and I've never heard Joe Finder sing, but he was in the Yale a cappella group, which is how he first got into thrillers on these long train rides in the 80s through Europe. So,
wow.
Men of many talents.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm so happy that I got to talk to you, and I'm even happier that I got to read your book because it really was a joy.
You.
Yeah, it really was. You know, it just took me back to the days when I just loved political thrillers, and I was like, this is why I love them. I forgot, you know, and you just did it, you know, you just did. I kind of like cheer you on while I'm reading, so I like talking to you. I'm like, oh my gosh, Matthew, that was the best chapter right there. Like, it's very interesting, but I do that, you know, like I like cheer you on as you're writing. So, and I kept doing that. Like I would be like, oh no, this is the best chapter. No, this one. This is the one that got me. So anyway, thank you so much, and I can't wait.
Oh, thank you.
One, I will. You know where to find me. I'll definitely be an early reader for you. I'd love to, and I will. Everybody out there, I will be putting all of his links listed below, along with that Amazon link, because you can go and buy it right now. It is out there in the world. And thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Yeah, take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.